Hi, this is Michael Olin-Hitt, and I want to continue my series on guidance for writers in a fun way. I'm going to share with you some of my recipes for story. However, before I give you the recipes, I want to first go over the basic ingredients of story. Now, these are the staples that we all should have in our writer's pantry. First of all, you want to have a real and original character. And then you want to place that character into a specific situation. And that situation needs to provide the character with some yearning or some desire and some trouble. If you don't have trouble, you don't have a story. The first line of Leo Tolstoy's Anna Karenina is, "Every happy family is alike, but each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way." It's the trouble that makes us interesting. We all may want to have a happy family, but nobody wants to read about one. Just saying. So let me talk about the trouble of a story just for a moment. You want the trouble to be often a yearning or a desire that the character has. And then you want to block the way for the character to fulfill that yearning. You want to present some obstacles, and that's kind of the basic element of story, the obstacle blocking the yearning. Let me talk to you a little bit about the character and that special ingredient. You want to be sure your character is fresh. No canned characters allowed in a good story recipe. And you want that character to have live yeast. Now that might be taking the metaphor of the recipe a little far, but what I mean by that is a character must change, must rise. There's where the yeast fits in. So you want a character that changes. If the character doesn't change, you don't have a story, you have a character sketch. So you want to avoid flat characters that do not rise or do not change. Stories are about the events that alter our lives, that transform us. So the character change is often called an epiphany, which is a realization or a transformative moment. Now, the way that you make sure the character changes is really through the plotting. And so I'm going to give you some baking instructions for plot. So a basic plot moves from complication to resolution. Now, complication is the trouble or the conflict or the yearning or the desire. And the resolution is just the closure. Now, this is important. Resolution does not mean solution. Most of the significant troubles or conflicts in our lives cannot be solved. We just have to learn to live with them. And in order to do so, we have to live with a different awareness, a different approach to the struggles of being human. And that's where the change often is. It's in that realization of a new awareness. So that's where we move our character, from the complication to the closure and the transformation. So now we have our basic ingredients for story, those staples we all have in our writer's pantry. And now it's time to present a few recipes for story. First of all, before you begin, you want to preheat your mind to dream space. One of my favorite authors, Robert Olin Butler, visited the university where I teach, and he emphasized to students that dream space is the origin of stories. This is the place of your creativity, your deep imagination. One of my favorite things to do as a story writer is dream up a story. Anyway, after you preheat your mind to reach dream space, you want to first add a character and situation, often sold together in the writing aisle. Second, stir in yearning or desire, adding complication to taste. 3, locate the moment of change. And this is important. When you see your character beginning to change, you want to turn up the heat to critical tension. Now write and watch rise. So that's your basic recipe for story. It seems pretty simple, but I tell you this, simplicity is really difficult. Writing a well-crafted story is much harder than you think. So follow that recipe and I think you're on your way. But I want to provide you with a few variations on that recipe. So here are some alternative ingredients. Flavor to taste. First, take a specific trouble, drop a specific character into it, add a touch of setting, bake, watching for a rise in character. Now that might seem a little general, and to be honest, story does start in particularity, in specifics. And often, the substance that we begin with, a story, is experiences of our own. You write about what you know, and then you change it into story. One of my favorite authors, Flannery O'Connor, once wrote, "You don't write about what you know, you write about what you don't know about what you know." What she meant by that is, as you explore a familiar setting, you begin to understand more some of the deeper elements of that setting that can alter a character. So not only do you delight the reader or the audience because of the change in character and the realizations, the writer, him or herself, can be altered, and their awareness can be altered by, the process of writing. Because of those specifics, for writing and using your own experience for inspiration, let me give you some other alternative ingredients. You can take a person you know, so there's the familiar, place him or her in a bizarre place, add a dash of trouble, stir, and write. You can also take a specific relationship in your life, make it more dysfunctional than in reality, and watch a memory rework itself. Finally, another alternative ingredient is this. Take an experience of yours and give it to a fictional character who is dramatically different from you. Simmer to boil, stirring constantly. In that alternative approach or alternative ingredient, you can start with something you know very well, your experience. So that's a familiar experience in a familiar setting with familiar oppositions and complications. But when you give it to a fictional character who's dramatically different from you, then you allow for that character to change, and you're not locked into the way things really happened. When you're locked into the things that really happened, then you can't really explore and be free to respond to the elements of story, the expectations of story, which have developed over centuries of storytelling. Now, I want to go over some basic baking instructions, and this is the process of writing for you. First of all, be prepared for multiple trips to the kitchen. That means revision. If you think you're going to write, a winning story or novel that's fully developed, extremely well crafted in a first draft, you are sorely mistaken. Every writer revises and revises and revises. It's just a part of the process. Next, you want to avoid shake and bake mixes. Story is made best from scratch. What I mean by that is you want to be original in your story. Don't kind of pick up all those mixes on the baking shelf, these pre-made ingredients with cliche plots and characters. That is not going to delight your readers. It's not going to show transformation. So, be original in your ingredients. So those are some of my basic recipes for story. I hope you find it helpful. If you want to see more of my guidance for writers, you can subscribe to my channel here on YouTube. You can also visit me at my website, michaelolin-hitt.com. If you want announcements on when my blogs come out and more videos on guidance for writers, you can like or follow me on Facebook or follow me on Twitter.